So Max, you also wanted to talk about the flipping.
Oh yeah.
Or a flippening.
Yes.
A new type of flippening.
A new flippening.
Tell us about it.
Oh, well, I mean, my thinking about this came from a couple of different places. You know, I briefly scrolled through a couple of the talks from the last Bitcoin conference. You know, I briefly scrolled through Balaji's. I think Balaji has a lot of good ideas. Scriptedness aside, I think he has a lot of good ideas. And one of them, I hadn't thought of this yet. I guess I have kind of informally thought of this, and we've sort of mentioned this in the show, but it really crystallized it for me, was based on some, I guess, numbering, some data that they crunched at Coinbase. His guess was that, you know, the total number of billionaires in the world, which I think he shares like 3,000, something like that we know of, is, you know, basically once Bitcoin, somewhere between $100,000 a coin and $1 million a coin, we have a flippening where the majority of the world's billionaires are Bitcoiners. And that's very interesting for a number of reasons. One of the reasons it's very interesting to me in relationship to the Type 1 Summit, in relationship to a prior PBJ episode where we discussed building an open source foundational model, and also inspired last night, as so many things are for me, in a great spontaneous sauna conversation, as I was talking for someone working at one of these HCI companies, the human computer interface, basically like Neuralink, like putting a chip in your brain. And, you know, increasingly coming away from that conversation, I was more excited about learning about, you know, this, the singularity, or the fusion, or whatever you want to call it. But I left just like terrified. I was already scared, but now I'm like, oh man, like as much as I love the compute and the solar and the money, and like, that's all great. And we need to fix that first. Like there's so many, again, like if I could go back to what I was saying earlier, so many incentive structures in our world that are just broken. And we have the tools with Bitcoin, with Nostr, all this stuff to like fix it in a way that you don't have a corporation or government. And I just think that corporations and nations are just outdated structures. Like they're not bad. They're not evil. It's just, they had their run in the 19th or 20th century. And now it's time for internet native stuff. And hearing him say all this, I was like, man, and I get the people that they and Neuralink and others are putting chips for now are people that are paralyzed. And yeah, if you're paralyzed, totally makes the risk trade-off makes it totally worth it. But like, would you guys put a random chip, even from someone like Elon, in your head? I wouldn't.
No way.
Absolutely no fucking way on this. Like no fucking way. But at the other hand, it's kind of like AI.
Future generations might say yes easily.
Well, maybe, but here's the thing. It's not that I want to be clear. It's not that I wouldn't put a chip in my brain. It's that I wouldn't put a chip in my brain, closed source, from a company or a government that I can't audit and know what the hell is going on.
Yep.
And so, yeah, the more I was talking about this, the more I was like, oh man, like it's like AI when we talked about the open source stuff. It's like, I don't want to be left behind. You know, I want to have the superpowers that come with being transhuman or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But like, I just never would put a company in my head. It doesn't matter who the company is.
Have you seen the Black Mirror episode about this?
No.
There's a great Black Mirror episode that walks through this. I'll fail to get the exact details right, but there's I think there was some sort of injury that this woman had, and there was one way to save her life. She was on the operating room about to die, and they asked her husband, well, hey, we have this new startup that claims they can solve this thing. Should we try? And she was on basically on her deathbed. And he said, yeah, sure, go for it. And then they did it. And then they walked through and they're like, oh, we have an expansion pack available. Would you like to buy that? Like, well, no, I'd rather not. And then she sort of has Tourette's or something weird. And then like, actually, you can buy the expansion pack and that'll fix it. And so it kind of, you see this little boiling the frog, and then it gets to be the point where she's like totally dependent on this corporation and there's no real alternative option. And I think it's, like a lot of Black Mirror, it's like both near and familiar and very likely in a sense, unless you take explicit choices to opt out or to shape or change the incentives for kind of how it works. It's a worthwhile view if you're thinking about getting a chip implanted in your head. I'm not thinking about getting a chip implanted. Not now. Maybe if there's an open source one.
You were before watching that episode.
I don't like kings and masters, and I don't like people controlling my thoughts. So.
Chips in your brain.
Not for me.
Not for you. Well, anyways, so I agree with you. The TLDR is I want an open source version. I'm open to exploring this in the future after they've had, decades of figuring this out or whatever. But I would only consider if it was open source. And so I asked this guy, I'm like, how much money would you need? I was like, will you guys open source? And he's like, I'm just a software engineer. I don't know. He's like, sounds cool, but like they need to make money. And so maybe Elon will do it. Again, with Elon, you're rolling the dice. Like he could just go totally like he did with Tesla patents and open source, of course. But again, you never want to just like depend. I mean, who knows, right? And Elon may not be here in the future, right? So
And he's like, here's a self-driving car. You can drive yourself. I'm like, that's not what I had in mind.
DK is more skeptical. but regardless, my broader point is you don't want to be dependent on any centralized entity to put a chip in your brain, full stop. But you also don't want to be left behind, because then you're gonna be like an Aborigine when everyone else is off, like, you know, going to Mars and stuff. So, which is not necessarily bad. And maybe the
I don't mind that,
right.
actually.
Yeah, actually, maybe that's
the
the
trade-offs. I think I'll take that one.
Given the current trade-offs. But again, we could imagine a better world. And so I was asking, well, how much money do you think roughly, if you had to guess, would it take to develop a product that you could bring to market? He was like, I don't know, $50 to $100 million. So I was like, I mean, it sounds like a lot, but it's not that much in the grand scheme of things. And then that's when I started thinking, I was like, you know what, maybe the biggest legacy of Bitcoin really is going to be that some of these people that still have cypherpunk values, that still care about human freedom, that still want the light of consciousness to shine on, that are not completely jaded and nihilistic. Maybe the biggest legacy of Bitcoin is they're just going to fund all of these projects, maybe for profit, maybe as like kind of like cathedral style, just like, like, you know, giving back to humanity. And like I thought about it, like the open source model, that's important, but this is even more important. And I was thinking, like, could I back this out of Highline? It's like probably too early for that right now. And like, you need way more capital than we have. But like, could a bunch of, you know, Bitcoin billionaires who care about human freedom come out, okay, we're going to start working way ahead of time on the open source Neuralink.
Yeah, I think that's a good, I mean, we're working out of a studio right now, courtesy of two wealthy Bitcoin holders.
Yeah,
right?
thanks, guys.
Thank you, Wences, and thank you, Mark. All of Presidio Bitcoin is funded by them. Or not all now, because we do have 25 paying members, so which helps defray the cost, but still the majority of the costs are funded by them. So that's just like a small example of what can come.
Yeah.
And it does seem like I didn't watch Balaji's talk on this, so I just did my own quick math. Looks like 3,000 billionaires. So to flip that, there needs to be 3,000. I think $1 million Bitcoin gets us there. I don't know about $100,000, but
and it gets us there. Does that mean there's $3,000 or 3,000 people who have about $1 billion worth of purchasing power?
Yes.
So
if we assume none of the current billionaires have Bitcoin, then it would flip. It would flip sooner if some of them are, obviously some of them already have Bitcoin.
And to be clear, we're not saying all 3,000, 1,500 to get 51%.
Sorry?
But presumably as Bitcoin is growing to be worth $1 million per Bitcoin, that even if the existing billionaires in US dollar terms don't hold any Bitcoin, presumably they're starting to buy some during that process, but they also continue to hold USD assets, and they don't.
I'm just saying, in the like the extreme case, none of the existing 3,000
just for simplicity,
ever have Bitcoin.
Right.
We would need 3,000 Bitcoin billionaires to flip. And
what is
I'm saying you need half now, like to be 51%.
No, because if you have 1,500, then you only have a third of the billionaires.
I think there's 3,000.
There are 3,000 today. Assume they just sit static.
Got it. Yeah,
meaning that
3,000
the
additive
to be
added.
Okay. So
depends on how fast we hyperinflate, but okay.
Anyway, I mean, so like to me, it's inevitable. Like Bitcoin is going to get to $1 million. There will be a flip.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I kind of like the flip.
The flip.
The flip.
Team flip.
And when?
But then
when do you? What do you think I think there's what do existing billionaires do with that wealth, and then what would Bitcoin billionaires? Would it look very similar? Would it look pretty different in some ways? Like you mentioned, funding Neuralink or an open source model.
Well, one concern I'd have, just looking at the amount of donations now from wealthy Bitcoiners, I think it's quite poor. Meaning,
it's just like a few.
It's a few, right?
Mm-hmm. They're doing a lot of lifting.
Like Wences and Mark, Wences has done a lot over time, and Mark more recently. John Pfeffer has done a lot, but it's a very Michael Saylor's funded certain things too. So, but it's a short list.
Yeah.
So it's a small percentage.
Jack is funding like half of everything.
Yeah, it's a small percentage of Bitcoin whales and a small percentage of quote available funds. Like, that gets into a philosophical discussion, but so I don't know how much that will change. And then for those that do donate, that gets to your question of do they fund different initiatives than have been done historically, because maybe it skews libertarian, skews cypherpunk,
maybe skews open source, maybe
skews open source,
skews more digital.
So
Like
skews
historically,
more digital. So that
people got into
that's
real
total.
estate.
That seems very plausible.
Yeah.
And then do they structure it differently than historically, like for profit versus nonprofit, or
something new,
DAOs or something? I don't know.
I wonder if some of the limitation in choice is sort of, once you understand Bitcoin and you understand kind of it's going up forever, it's harder to say, look, I'm going to donate to a place that may not have that same belief, and they might sell it to try to fund operations, and it might get a little bit off the rails, versus if I wait 10 years and then I do it,
right,
I can actually, make a bigger impact, do more, and I don't have the risk of people kind of like selling early to convert to some project which may not quite work. So I wonder if people become like more generous as that price rises, in a sense.
Well, you can also just
more
lock it
people
up.
become,
That's
like,
what
make
I
that a
say.
condition.
You can lock it up, and then they'd be forced to take out Bitcoin-backed loans,
right?
But retain their Bitcoin.
Or you could you even do like HTLCs to time lock it to a future point, or like dole it out over, like you almost set a budget and dole it out.
I wouldn't use HTLCs, but yes,
okay,
you can
sorry.
do that.
Wrong technology.
DK is getting into the Bitcoin technicals. But yeah, so I think, interesting structures like that, like programmable, like let's use programmable money.
Yeah.
So that's like under discussed.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up.
And it's also because you can imagine the structure is changing. Like maybe the reality is some of these things are effectively public goods. And frankly, this is what the government should be doing. And like one day we'll have like an effective government again, and like they'll be doing that. But maybe you basically need generous donors that skew open source, skew, pro freedom to get it started. But you could also be like a hybrid structure where it's like, okay, but then it becomes a company, right? Because one of my theses is that, like, imagine, and I would love to fund this out of HiMime, it's probably way too early, but imagine you had an open source competitor in the, human brain interface. There's a lot of people that are going to be like, yeah, I'll do it, but like, I'm not using the proprietary one.
Right.
And particularly people that, tend to have money or, skew wealth, they'll understand why this is so important. So it's not like this is pure charity. Like you might need charity to kickstart things, but then I think you could build a great business too.
Yep.
Yeah. Food for thought.